Let's delve into the future of Bridget McKenzie amidst these latest allegations today. Joining me is Sky News Political Editor Andrew Clennell. Andrew, where we're at right now, Bridget McKenzie's defence of this revelation today about a grant going out to a club she was a member of. She says it was a free membership and it was less than the value of $300, so that's why she didn't declare it. What we don't know is, did she declare it to anyone that when she was sorting through the grants process? Did it go in her ministerial declarations as well? And they're answers that are still going begging at the moment.
Well, I don't think she did, Tom, and I don't think she did because the mail I'm getting is that the Prime Minister's patience is getting tested at the moment with this latest revelation, and while he was of a mind to back Bridget McKenzie earlier in the week and he's kind of standing ground on the issue at the moment, there wouldn't want to be too many revelations for Bridget McKenzie like this, or it might be a situation of Mr Morrison having a discussion with Michael McCormack and Bridget McKenzie having to fall on her sword. So, look, there's two things going on at the moment. There's this latest revelation. She joins this club in Wangaratta in January 2019. They get a $35,000 grant in February 25, 2019. Everything that I've heard this morning suggests there was no ministerial declaration around that. You can argue about the figure and all that, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the pub test, and she's already in enough trouble on this issue. There was a school of thought that the PM's office knew where all the grants were going. They were involved somehow, and so they would protect her, but I'm not sure that the PM would have known about this little conflict. The other issue that is being explored, the Attorney-General seeking advice from the Solicitor-General on the legality of Bridget McKenzie doing her own grants as opposed to the Sports Commission, which is an independent agency, having to administer them under the law. There's some confidence in government that that legal loophole will be cleared, but that's another opportunity, I guess, for Scott Morrison to act on perceived sloppiness. And I'll repeat again, I would not be surprised to see Bridget McKenzie sacked over this affair. It really depends what happens in coming days. And, sorry, this morning we heard from Tim Wilson on this, and he wasn't exactly emphatic in backing Miss McKenzie.
Ultimately, this is a decision for the National Party and about her as deputy leader. Leaders and deputy leaders of parties are elected by their party rooms. I'm a member of the Liberal Party room. She's a member of the National Party room. So these are the sorts of decisions for the National Party. But what she's done is gone about her job of making sure she allocates funding for local sports infrastructure across the country. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion about how that's been done, but in the end, that's her job.
Yeah, well, look, not quite walking the plank, and it is just a backbencher commenting on a minister, but your point is a solid one, Andrew Clennell. You can sense the shift here in rhetoric. James Patterson, as well, on the program this morning, pushed for his opinion. He did give a defence, I should mention, of Bridget McKenzie, but when pushed to say, well, let's find out about whether or not she made the declaration, why can't we get that transparency, apparently didn't even have a view on it. Have a look. What stops the government now, or Bridget McKenzie, from saying, here are all the details around this particular grant? Surely they can release that.
Well, that's a matter for her office and her as a minister. But the good
I'm
news
asking
is,
if
Tom,
you think she should.
Yeah, I don't have a strong view either way, Tom. That's really a matter for her, whether she thinks that's appropriate.
You don't have a view?
No, that's what I just said.
Certainly one to keep an eye on, Andrew. The PM also releasing some detail on what he wants out of the National Royal Commission with this apparent plan to pressure the states on hazard reduction. What did you make of this shift? He was saying as well that this could be even more important than climate change in terms of Australia's role.
Well, it was a very interesting interview with Peter Credlin, wasn't it? And I guess he has a point there in the sense that hazard reduction can save your home. Emissions reduction, given China's emissions and the US emissions and India's emissions, you could reduce all of Australia's emissions and it wouldn't save your home. Nevertheless, there'll be some concern from the moderates in the Liberal Party that he's paying so much attention to hazard reduction and not as much to emissions reduction as well. It also appears clear to me he's set the scene for this Royal Commission to really have a crack at the New South Wales government. And there's a real division there now, Tom, between Gladys Berejiklian and Matt Keane on one side and Scott Morrison on the other side. And he seems to be saying, you didn't do your bit on hazard reduction, you didn't do your bit on letting me get the Army Reservists in, so I'm going to have this commission and show you did the wrong thing, and then we're going to have some changes. Let's hear what he said on hazard reduction.
The other part of what I think an inquiry would look at is how we're performing when it comes to reducing the risk of as we face these fires and hotter, drier and longer summers. Now, that's, you know, you talk about action on climate change, that's what that is. Hazard reduction is action to take account of the climate we're living in, and hazard reduction is as important as emissions reduction, and many would argue, I think, even more so, because it has an even more direct practical impact on the safety of a person. But across the country, there is not a national system of reporting to track how hazard reduction is progressing.
So, Premier Gladys Berejiklian interviewed her last week, and she was defending their hazard reduction record. They met their target of 135,000 hectares in the first year Matt Keane was Minister last year. The 2 previous years, they didn't meet the target. Her argument's similar to the Rural Fire Service Chief, Tom, Shane Fitzsimmons, who says certain weather conditions mean you can't do hazard reduction. But there's a couple of layers to this debate. Obviously, we've had a lot of natural hazard reduction with the bushfires, you know, hundreds of thousands of hectares being burnt out. But I think one of the issues is around one's home. There seems to be a lot of fines and penalties a local council can give if you try to reduce the hazard around your home, and that is certainly an issue that governments can look at. But let's see what Gladys Berejiklian said when she was defending herself on this point last week.
People in elected jobs like myself need to take the advice of our experts, and what heartens me in New South Wales is that the RFS has been working closely with the Forestry Corporation.
Are you concerned with that at the prospect of a potential blame game here? And I guess I'm talking...
No, I'm not.
Right,
I'm
why
not? At all. Because our emergency experts warned us about how ferocious the season would be. They asked us for more equipment, which we provided. So I'm more than happy for a fine-tooth comb to be put over all of our activities, because we will learn from this into the future.
So Scott Morrison made it really clear he wanted this Royal Commission done and dusted before the next bushfire season. That is a spectacularly short period of time for a Royal Commission. It's a good thing, of course. We need to know what to do before the next bushfire season, but it's very much not the case usually for a Royal Commission if you want a proper and thorough inquiry. And what are we going to see here, Tom? Are we going to see premiers on the stand? Are we going to see Shane Fitzsimmons on the stand defending his approach? We've got the scene set here for a war between federal and state governments on this issue, and Scott Morrison seems happy to take that fight on, even though he says he's working with the states on the terms of reference. Let's hear what South Australian Premier Stephen Marshall said about hazard reduction on our program this morning, because he was clear that, you know, Kangaroo Island, there was nothing more that could be done. Let's listen to that.
Look, I certainly think that we need to be doing our hazard reduction before the fire season each year. That was the case on Kangaroo Island with all the prescribed burns and the coal burns, as I understand it, were completed. That hasn't always been the case, but it certainly was the case in the lead up to this fire season. And I think we do need to be sure. Every state needs, well, I think has an obligation to make sure that those prescribed burns and coal burns are done in accordance with the plan.
Has to be said, Tom, that on the ground, the reports from journalists and politicians are that this is the #1 issue, hazard reduction, and people are really complaining about it. So Scott Morrison's hit the right note there. There is a little bit of talk about climate change, but not as much, because the imperative, obviously, is to keep your home safe. So he's hit the right note in terms of the issue, I think, politically. The problem is going to be how this goes with the states, because by necessity, if you're saying you need to do more, you seem to be saying the states haven't done enough. Now, they might be happy to agree to more, but they are not going to agree that they haven't done enough. And a couple of these states we've heard from this morning are Liberal governments, of course.
Yeah, it comes to the question of when was that point at which you needed to do more? When was the old rule of hazard reduction not enough? Who should have been aware of that, including, no doubt, plenty of agencies within state governments, but federal governments as well. So careful when you point the finger, I guess. Andrew Clennell, thank you.
Thanks.